we're going to play with cloth in Maya and Unreal. So we're actually going to do a little mini pipeline with our DCCs, our digital content creators. Now this is going to be specifically Maya to Unreal, but to be honest, you could do exactly the same tricks with Blender or Houdini or Cinema 4D, because usually when we come to like cloth simulations, they all kind of behave the same. They've all got similar kinds of functions, and the file format that we're going to be using to get from like Maya to Unreal is called an Alembic, and usually most good 3D packages support that as well. So let's go through the process, and then hopefully in about 20 minutes we'll create a Alembic simulation playing in Unreal. Now the rationale for this as well is using the 3D program to generate the simulation of the cloth moving around in this kind of abstract way with no gravity and something called turbulence, but then leveraging the real-time qualities of Unreal, where I can play with the camera and lights and materials without the expense of having to re-render and spending hours watching it kind of simulate as I do any kind of adjustments with the cameras and rendering. Here I've got the playground of real time. So I'm going to kind of hop over to Maya and start the process of making a cloth. So I'm going to keep it super basic, but it kind of shows the starting points to make a little cloth like this. Right, let's go to Maya. Okay, so here we are in Maya, and we're going to make our kind of cloth. So first thing I need to do is make a plane, and while I got that plane, let's scale that up so it's not like just a tissue or a napkin, the one that's on a kind of blanket size. So we're going to make that larger, because when we use cloth simulation, scale is kind of quite important to the units measurement and how it reacts to stuff. So I'm going to scale this up to a decent size. More importantly, this plane needs to have a lot of subdivisions, otherwise we won't get the folds and creases that we're kind of wanting for a good successful cloth sim. So I'm going to set this to 120 by 120. While I've got the plane selected as well, I'll go into my effects tab, go to nCloth and make an nCloth using what we've just chosen. You can see if I press play, it'll just kind of drop because gravity is pulling against it. Nothing else is going on. So if I go to these new things that are in my outline, if I go to the nucleus, you can set gravity to 0. That means it'll just kind of float in midair. And also I'm going to go to the plane, and if I look at my attribute editor, it's kind of got this thing called output cloth node, and actually I'm going to call this cloth for Unreal. There's a little bit of housekeeping, because when I save this later as an Alembic, that's actually what the mesh is going to be called. That's what that data set is going to be called. So I might as well name it now, otherwise it's called an output mesh. Got nothing happening really on the thing now because there's no gravity acting on it, so I'm going to use something called a turbulence field. So while I've got the plane selected, go along to the top and go to fields and solvers, look for turbulence, have a look at the kind of attributes. You can give that field name a name. I'll call mine already windy day. I could set the magnitude. I'm going to set this to maybe 20. You could play around with the numbers, see what they do, but if I click apply, you can see down here this orange line is representing kind of the caching in the background, so it's kind of thinking about the geometry against all that simulation. And as you can see, as it's pre-cached, it's already got that data on that mesh, but if I go past frame 88, which it got to, there's nothing else cached. Yeah, so I have to kind of let it do its rendering in the background. So this is also dependent on how much RAM you've got. Other things I might do is a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to set the timeline to roughly 500 frames. I want 500 frames of simulation. I'm going to set this to 30 frames per second. And also you can kind of see that if I right click, I've got cache playback on by default. So that's how I've got that kind of orange line that's kind of simulating in the background. So starting again, that's simulating, it's going through its thing. You see how it kind of moves with that turbulence field. But really now I just got to be patient. But you know, with this pipeline we're exploring, this is the only time where I have to be patient to let the computer do its simulation and bake this geometry cache, which then when I take it into Unreal, we've got this kind of predictable baked kind of folding shape, but then I can play with lighting and materials and cameras in a full like real-time setting, rather than in Maya where I'd have to kind of keep rendering it again and again. That can be quite costly and stop me kind of experimenting. So that's kind of the thesis of this like little pipeline, is using the 3D package to simulate our kind of cloth, but use Unreal for the rendering and leveraging its real-time properties. It's nearly there, it's nearly got to frame, well, 30 frames per second now, so it's 625 frames to get there. There we go. The reason I've chose 30 frames per second is because that's the Unreal cinematic default as well, so matching for matching. So we've got our cloth, it's all cached now. If I press play, because it's cached, and we've got our timeline playing back at frames rather than play all frames. We can kind of get its real-time speed. So you can see this is gracefully moving around. We've got a nice kind of abstraction of a cloth floating in the wind. Kind of having to sacrifice maybe the first 50-60 frames because that's kind of the pre-warm-up. But I'm going to keep those in, and I'll show you how to trim them off when we get that into Unreal. But really, from like frames 100 to the rest, we've got a nice kind of cloth folding and then kind of getting buffeted around. So I'm kind of happy with that. So let's get that out of Maya so we can kind of get into Unreal. So what do I need to do next? So remember I've named that kind of output cloth already. So if I go to the plane and select the plane, go to cache up at the top, it's already kind of pre-cached, go to Alembic and export selection to Alembic, and here we'll get this little window, and what I need to do is like export everything on the time slider, so that's frames kind of 0 to 625, you can see that it's there, and more importantly we got where it says that we need to rewrite the UV set, so make sure those are two ticked. If we don't have those ticked, we can't add a material in Unreal, because it's not only just writing the geometry data, but it's kind of writing that in mind of where the UV coordinates are as well. So I've got to make sure that those are kind of both are selected. Export selection, I'm going to go export selection. We have an opportunity here to find or make a folder to put this what's called .abc file. That's the Alembic suffix. So if I go to my desktop, I've got already a folder called cloth geo. Been playing around already, creating some stuff, but I'm going to call this one cloth Unreal play. Yeah, that's just to kind of save all of that data. Export it. Just be patient because it's kind of going through those 625 frames that it's pre-cached, and it's baking it into a very large data file. And it's probably large, it'll be about like a gig. Right, we're kind of done with Unreal now, so I should save up and move over to Unreal. So there's Unreal, there's our one from before, but let's start from scratch. So if I make a new empty level, and let's get that Alembic in. So first of all, I'm going to go to my content. You can see I've already been playing before, but we'll make a new folder. We'll call this cloth new. It's always good to have like a folder for bits and bobs, so you know where things are. So that's where I'm going to put this Alembic file. So we're going to right click into that empty folder we just made. I'm going to import into there. I'm looking quite specifically for that folder that we just exported to, and it was called Cloth Geo, and it was Cloth Unreal Play. That's the one we just made. .abc. If I click open, this window pops up, and you can see, look, because we named it in Maya, the track name's called Cloth for Unreal. That's the geo data that we wanted. 625 frames for it, but really important, where it says import type on static mesh, but we want geometry cache, we need to select that one instead. As I scroll down, the other thing I'm going to do is create a material based on this mesh, and that's what will be attached, and use the UV space. So if I create that now, it kind of assigns a material to this geometry cache that we're bringing in, or this Alembic that we're bringing in. So if I click import now, the only other settings I might play with in the future is things like scale, because it is going to bring it in as centimetres, but we can kind of adjust accordingly after the fact as well. So let's import that in. You can see it's bringing in these 600 frames of data. Okay, there we go. So we've got our kind of cloth geometry cache. So if I double click on that, there it is, playing. And you can see it's got that basic material attached to it. But one problem is, because it's a plane, it's a kind of only got faces on one side, and the material itself needs to be two-sided, so I can kind of render it so it can look underneath. So how do I do that? Well, we have the material. At the moment it doesn't actually even have a name because we didn't make one in Maya, so it's called no face set name. So in fact, let's rename that, because that's bugging me, so let's call that cloth mat. So I double click on that though. In the kind of shader, I'm going to go here and make sure in the details that I switch on two-sided, apply that and save it. In fact, you can see now it's updated. We've got proper kind of white cloth now, because it's already attached to that geometry. There it is, and you can see that we can look above and below. It's a two-sided material now, ready to play with. Okay, so what can we do? Let's get that into the world and play with it. So if I bring that geometry cache in and click here to zero it into the centre of the world, press F to focus on it. Well, there it is. It's not looking great. If I go to the details of that cloth and play with offset time, you can see ungracefully I can kind of scroll through the frames, but there's a better way to do that. We're going to do that with a cinematic sequencer. But while I'm here, let's put some light into the situation. So I'm in this completely empty scene, devoid of lights. I want it like a studio, something quite abstract, so I'm going to use a rectangle softbox. I'm going to bring that up above, again zero it out, and point it down so it's kind of facing the cloth. Maybe even here, kind of give it a little bit of a colour. It's quite sweet. Duplicate the light. I'm going to get one coming below, so I'm going to rotate that 180 degrees and maybe get a complementary that blue, so I can give it some more kind of straw colour to the blue. Maybe get that kind of orange. So you can see that we've got blue on the side, orange on the other. So I've got that kind of like 2-point lighting. And right, I'm ready to play a little bit further. So I can gracefully play with the cloth, I need to create a sequence. So if I add level sequence, we'll call this like cloth play, and that's specifically for this map. The sequence is empty, so I'm going to bring the cloth geometry in, and well, nothing's really happening there because I also need to add the geometry cache. So as soon as I add that, you can see the data is added like any old clip like motion capture and stuff. So if I scrub the timeline there, you can see it now plays it like it was in Maya. I'm going to set that timeline similarly to 600 frames, and you can see that matches the 30 frames per second. I don't need those first 50-60 frames, so it's like a clip now. I can just drag the front of that clip and drag it those 60 frames, so I can kind of edit them off, or I could kind of split the edit. But there we go, we've got the cloth kind of moving. If I zoom the camera in a bit closer, you can kind of see, there it goes. Okay, not too bad. And just get that end point, so it kind of ends roughly around there, and that'll loop. So, let's kind of do some adjustments. So at the moment we've got this just like white material on it, very basic. So if I go to a website like Polyhaven, I could download materials and images to create a texture that we can put onto this cloth. So if I go to my folder here and we've got our cloth material, I'm going to make a new folder here and we'll call this like textures, and in that textures let's import. So I've already downloaded something from Polyhaven, and if I import into there by going to downloads, you can see we've got these textures. So I want the normal, basically I need the normal roughness, specularity, the colour itself, and a metallicness. So I've got all of these maps that I can pipe into the material. So I've got those textures. If I go back to the material itself, I'm going to put these together a bit like a hyper shader. So if I go into my textures folder, let's bring that one in and pipe that RGB into base colour. And I'm just going to go down them now. So I've got our kind of metallicness, so let's put that into metallic. And then what's the next one? Specular, so put the specular into specular. And then we want our roughness. Roughness kind of controls the quality of the metallic reflective qualities. And then the last but not least is our kind of normal map that I'm going to put into normal. So if we just organise them nicely into that shader, we've got all of those kind of maps, but as you can see over here, that's updated. Looking quite sweet, got all that nice threads. These are kind of 4K textures. So if I apply that and save, you can see over here the cloth is updated and it's looking quite spectacular. We haven't even started getting into the camera yet. So it's looking a little bit like a napkin. So maybe I want to kind of tile this texture more repeat across the surface, so I can do that in the material itself. If I go back and click cloth material, I'm going to add a new node and it's going to be called texture coordinates. So as soon as I keep typing it, you can see it appears. And this, I want it to kind of be piped into all of these maps. Otherwise they'll kind of get offset from each other. So I'm going to drag that and put it into the kind of thing where it says UV. So out of there into UV, out of there into UV, out of there into UV, out of there into UV. That's, oops, let's get that all tied up. Then if I open this up, you can see I'm tiling a 1 by 1. Well, let's move this up by a factor of 6. So 6 horizontal, 6 vertical. You can see that's a little bit more repeated. If I press apply and save, you can see now we got quite a nice kind of tiling of that kind of texture. It feels a bit more like a blanket now, as opposed to kind of a napkin. Right, so next stage, we've lit it, got a light from above, we kind of got it moving in space, it kind of floats around. What else can we do? We've got the geometry cache itself, so if I right click on it and go edit section, you can see you could reverse the geometry cache. You can even like slow down its playback or speed it up, so if I put it maybe down to 0.6, even though we kind of baked 600 frames, that's kind of added another, by making it 2/3 slow, it's added about another 300 frames, so it's another way of kind of getting some geometry data and then using Unreal to kind of time stretch it. So that's what we've done there. And right, let's kind of play around with the camera itself now. So at the moment I'm still in kind of this game's perspective mode, but I'm kind of scrubbing through the sequence. Let's say I like this kind of camera angle, maybe kind of coming in from above. So I'm kind of like virtual film scouting. I kind of like that vantage. So what I'm going to do is, while I'm in this position, I could kind of go here, create new camera, and set it as the current camera cut. So if I click that, that's kind of made a camera. It's made a camera cut track, and this is currently 35mm. But if I make it back to say maybe about 12mm, that's kind of like the perspective camera. I've got a massive focus distance at the moment, so let's get that down to maybe about 20, and then kind of scrub in that number there, and kind of get that kind of edge of frame. And this is where it might be that our units are kind of off, so I feel this is still kind of titchy. So if I go to the cloth and I just scale it up by a factor of 10, there we go. Now I can kind of move the camera back a little bit more, and the focus feels a lot better, a bit more controllable. Yeah, there we go. So it's a little bit too small to begin with. So units, you've got to kind of think about the unit measurements. So there we go. Got a kind of warm light underneath, kind of bright light from above. Right, what else can we do? So I've got the kind of cloth playing, but it's kind of blowing out, and that's because we've got auto exposure on. So while I've got the Cine camera active, go over here where it's got the camera actor, I'm going to start typing exposure, and I'm going to take these three on. So I want metering mode now to be switched to manual, and through experience I found that it's good to add I'm going to add 10, so this is kind of like a gain boost, like sometimes you have on digital cameras, and we also want it to behave kind of like a physical camera, so I've got that kind of ticked. But because I've kind of got that set as 10 and it's not auto exposing now, if I go into the lights themselves and adjust them, I've got full exposure control now, and they're kind of behaving like lights. They're not blowing out, they're not changing their intensity as I move the camera or change the field of view or stuff like that. And if I go for the one underneath, kind of even like just make that like a stop difference. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make that kind of like more like a purpley colour, like that kind of blue. But can you see by adjusting the colours on the fly, I've got all that wonder of the real-time rendering. Again, just keep kind of like finding the frame that you like. So I'm piloting the camera. Yeah, I quite like how the folds are creasing from that angle. One chance to kind of adjust the focus. There we go, that's looking nice. And there we go. got a kind of cloth sim. That's ready to kind of export as an image sequence. Things that would make it better, definitely more subdivisions, would make it kind of less crinkly, but then longer to simulate in Maya. But worth it in the long run. It would also make the geometry file a lot larger as well, so be prepared for that. We made a two-sided material, and there it is, kind of rendering and floating as kind of like an abstract cloth. Lots more we could do with it, but as I say, this is to demonstrate a pipeline of getting an Alembic from Maya to Unreal and attaching a material to it. So let's end it there, and I think a tatty bye, yay, 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 yay.